What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, and I am hopefully your favorite blind film critic. If not, tell me who is, because I'd love to meet them. I'm finishing out my Hunger Games second looks with Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. This film is still directed by Francis Lawrence, and it still has audio description by Deluxe, narrated by Tansy Alexander. And I've been watching these off of Netflix, and the sound mixing has been all over the place. So we're going to talk about that. But it's obviously this film still has the same stars. It has Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson, Liam Hemsworth, Woody Harrelson, Elizabeth Banks, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Julianne Moore, Donald Sutherland. The list goes on. There's just so many people in this film by now because it's the final film, so it's everybody who we've accumulated, and then there's like a couple of people who just kind of pop up for the final movie. They're just like, hey, what's up, we're a new character that was introduced in the back half of the Mockingjay book. So so this is the action part of the Mockingjay novel. I mentioned in my review for Mockingjay Part 1 is it's really hard because like the first one is all like character development and like mood and settings, and the second one is all like action. And one of the things that I lamented is the fact that I felt like they didn't use enough time to really set up Finnick, and even in Part 2, it feels like we really underuse Finnick a lot. And the book does a much better job with Finnick as a character, and that's just my general opinion of the film. Blind, not blind, whatever, that would be my opinion of the film, is that Finnick feels like more of a character in the book than he does in the films. It's amazing that he's managed to break out from, that Sam Claflin has managed to break out from playing Finnick, despite the fact that his character is really poorly developed. He gets a couple of scenes here and there, but arguably for somebody who's supposed to be sort of like a breakout character, he doesn't really get that level of popularity thrown to him in terms of the screen time. So as a matter of fact, there were scenes. There was a scene where I thought I'd missed his moment. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, so we're just gonna say moment. I thought I missed his moment in Part 2 because it wasn't in the audio description, and I was like, they were doing like this big scene, and they kept talking about what's happening to all these other characters, and I was like, but where is he? Where's Finnick? Finnick should be here. Why haven't we touched on where Finnick is? I was like, if I'm able to see right now, would I be able to see Finnick? And the audio description just isn't bringing him up. So anyway, I just had thoughts like that. I just kind of feel like he just gets left behind. And what's really funny is that they try to give like an emotional core ending to Finnick at the end, like he was such this big emotional grounded part. He's much bigger in Catching Fire, and then Mockingjay, they're just like, well, we have this guy now. They kind of do the same thing to Joanna too, by the way. She gets very like not a lot to do. I don't know how to say it nicely. She just gets thrown aside, so that she has like one or two scenes throughout the entire. I would love to see director's cuts of these films if it meant that it extended some of these characters who for some reason got the short end of the stick in the Mockingjay, even though Mockingjay as itself is already like a 4-hour movie because you split it into two things. I'd be willing to watch a longer Part 1 and Part 2 separately if they included more footage of the characters who got shortchanged. So I don't need more Katniss. She's fine. She has plenty of screen time. But some of the other characters got a little shortchanged. It's obviously in the second movie too. They have a limited amount of screen time with Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. There's some stuff that happens, like Woody Harrelson ends up reading a note. Haymitch ends up reading a note from Philip because there's only just so much she could do. I can't remember if any of his stuff was reused footage or CGI or anything like that. I think he may have completed filming, but he does have kind of like a lot of scenes where he's just kind of seen not talking, the kind of scenes that are really easy to, use to make him as a visual effect, so to speak, is to have him sort of like standing in the background and smiling or waving or doing whatever. So yeah, it's possible. Um, but yeah, we invade the capital, and of course there are major losses. This is the final movie. This is the end for Hunger Games, so of course this sets up many character deaths. Some pretty notable ones. They were like, well, who's the Dumbledore? Like, who, who can we hit hard with here in the finale? Who can we lose all of a sudden that would shock everybody? And they found it. To arguably, they absolutely found that character. And I have so many conflicted emotions, and I've had so many conflicted emotions about it, because it is absolutely like the one character that shocks you the most. It shocks you when you read the book. You're just like, what? Because it kind of negates everything in a weird way. It kind of just, like, everything from the very beginning, and you can understand sort of why Katniss like loses her mind over it. Um, and the film tries to do a decent job of moving through the scene. It's got to move through a lot of things pretty quickly, even though it's still a book that's been split into two movies, and it's basically a 4 hour. So you'd think that they'd be able to get everything in from the book. You'd be wrong. But yeah, so definitely at least one major character death, and some other character deaths too that hit hard. Mahershala Ali is actually really fantastic in this. He has a moment with Katniss when Katniss is sort of down, and she sort of is like, I don't really care about me, blah blah blah. I don't, I don't, and he's like, I want you to grow old, and he's, because you deserve it, because you earned it. So it's just like it reminds you of how good of an actor he is, even though he's given so little to do in this role. Just this little exchange that he has with Katniss has so much weight behind it, because he gives it the kind of weight and the gravitas needed, which is so true of a lot of the actors, like Philip Seymour Hoffman. Julianne Moore does what she can with Coin, but they've written Coin very oddly in this film, because they don't want you to know that she's bad, but Julianne Moore clearly knows she's bad, so she plays her as a very standoffish character the whole time. And it was one of the things I pointed out in the part one review, is there's never a warmth to her. There's never any part of her character. And I feel like if there had been more of that, like the twist part of her character would work more. But Julianne Moore plays her as like sums up. Like from the moment you meet her, you're just like, this is not going to be somebody, who anybody can trust. And it just turns out to be right. And Katniss, of course, takes care of that. And I don't know. I like part two. I think it fixes a lot of problems with part one, simply unfairly, because it is the part of the book where where shit starts happening. So it's got the action sequences, it's got all the fighting and the major character deaths, and part one just doesn't have that. Where part two fails are in some of the where are they nows. Like at the end, when we see Katniss and where she ends up, And we get to see a couple of characters, and it even flashes forward, and we get a little wrap up. Annie sends her a nice little letter, so we get a little wrap up of where Annie is, and it's fine that we don't get to touch in on everybody. We get the goodbye with Effie, and you know, Hoffman's character, Plutarch or whatever his name is, sends her the letter. So it's like all the people we've met along the way who mattered at all seem to have touched in. The weird thing is Gale, that like she has this exchange with Gale that's not really Gale's fault, and then just never talks to him again, which isn't really what I remember from the book. If I remember correctly, I think he ends up with somebody who's not who they didn't put in the book. There's another character. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't look this up because I read the books. I don't know, 14 years ago, something like that. I thought he ended up with a character that they didn't put into the movies. So I guess it was hard for them to figure out, like, how do we show this? In the original book, Katniss had like a quasi friend from District 12 who gave her the Mockingjay locket or whatever, that they ended up saying that Prim ends up giving to her or whatever. It was actually from this other girl. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's just they kind of just pushed her character out. I think she was like the mayor's daughter or something like that. I think that's who Gale ends up with. But she doesn't exist in the film, in the film franchise. So we just never see Gale again, which is so weird because like he's never had more screen time than he does in the Mockingjay films. And they've constantly been setting up this dynamic in this relationship, this friendship between Katniss and Gale. It's so weird that we end without touching base on Gale. I thought that was weird the first time, and it's still weird. It's the weirdest thing about this film is that Gale is not like anywhere to be found after a certain point in the film, and you're just like, where the fuck did Gale go? Like, like I get but at some point, and the fact that we flash forward into the future a little bit, and we like jump a little bit in time, and Gale's still not there. It's just like, where is Gale? It is one of the weirdest things, and it's like, I don't think the book does that. Granted, it's been a while. It's like trying to ask me about all these books that I remember like reading as a kid, and I'm like, I don't know. I remember reading it. I don't remember every little detail about the film. There was a point when I read the Harry Potter books that I could have gone on a Harry Potter trivia game and won. But like years later, I'm like, I kind of remember that. I guess that's probably why people keep reading the books over and over. I'm kind of like a one read person. I don't know, maybe I'll go back and revisit a book at some point in my life, but I don't think I've ever reread, except for like when I was a little kid, like having my parents read to me like a bedtime story, the same one, Good Night Moon, you know. But other than Good Night Moon, I don't think I really ever reread a book before. Yeah, it's weird to have that setup, that triangle set up, and then just Gale just vanishes. So it's just a thought. Anyway, audio description wise, this series has been all over the fucking place. This series is all over the fucking place. Catching Fire is the only one that is properly balanced all the way through, top to bottom. Catching Fire is expertly balanced and is on Netflix perfectly, just fine. You can understand the whole film. You can understand the film, and the audio description is excellent. It is excellent balancing. The first one, the audio of the film is way too quiet, and the audio description is way too loud. The third film, Mockingjay Part 1, same thing. Film volume, way too quiet, audio description, loud. This film is both. This film is literally, there are some times where for some reason the film is inaudible, and then there are other times, action sequences, where it obliterates the audio description. It is so, the balancing on this is so weird. It is so bizarre because there are some conversations that I'm, but my, and you'd be like, John, you need to check your hearing. It's like, dude, the audio description is the same level the whole time. I matched it because at the beginning of the film, it doesn't start out with like an explosion, right? It just starts out like normally. So I set it at the beginning, and my audio description was already loud, and I could tell it was going to be a problem because like they'd have conversations and the audio description would be talking as loudly as I have it turned up, and then you would hear conversations and they'd be like, we need to go back to the capital. I don't know, I don't really want to do that. We have to go do these things now. And you're just like, what the fuck are they saying? And then all of a sudden they have these action sequences that are like at full volume. Like they, so then like my TV, like there's an explosion and it feels like my whole room is like shaking. And then like right after that, they'll have like a scene of dialogue where like everybody's whispering. It's like, I don't know what you think about that. I got nothing, man. I don't know what to tell you. And then like, but like while the action sequences are going on, you can't hear the audio description. It gets obliterated by the action sequence, by the explosions and the gunfire and whatever. But then when there there isn't an action sequence, this is the weirdest franchise to watch on Netflix. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what the audio balancing is on this, but I don't blame Deluxe because I know that this stuff gets made primarily originally for theatrical. I'm sure this was the theatrical audio description, and then it just gets moved around and ported. And this isn't a Netflix original, so it gets moved around from streaming service to streaming service. So this is however Netflix has interpreted the audio file, and they're not checking it. Nobody double checked the audio files, so the balancing is just off. And I saw today when I was going through Mockingjay Part 2, it let me know that last day to watch it was May 31st, and I was like, well, fuck, because I'm reviewing it and it's leaving this month. So watch it quickly, guys. So yeah, I started getting the leave notifications, and my timing is great. I love it. So this weird experience that I had, nobody may ever have again, because it's possible that when Hunger Games leaves Netflix and then comes back around a year, 2 years from now or whatever, to Netflix again and ends up popping up, when they reload the audio files, they may reload them differently. Could be different films that end up loading well. Mockingjay Part 1 could be great, Catching Fire could be terrible, and the first one could be way too loud in some parts, and way too, it could be totally different experience. So, who knows? But it's been a ride. But what I have been able to tell is that Deluxe and Tansy have produced and given some excellent audio description. As somebody who's seen all of the films before losing my vision, I was able to see all these films, and I read the books. I feel like the audio description here is really solid. As much as it could be. I just had a couple of questions, only because admittedly I've only seen the Mockingjay films once. I've seen the first one like 5 times, I think, before I saw it again. I think I'd seen Catching Fire twice, and honestly I think I've seen Mockingjays once, maybe twice, but yeah, I struggled a lot more remembering things from Mockingjay than I did the first 2 films. So yeah, that's so I'm a little bit less critical of little things and being like, I can't fully remember. I mean, I remember a lot of it, but not all. I remember less of Mockingjay visually to be able to compare. Like the certain scene that I mentioned with Finnick, I was like, I don't know who's there. Honestly, I can't remember. I can't remember who gets shown, who doesn't. I mean, I remember the scene like in general, but not like vividly. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for joining me on this journey. I now have reviews up for all of the Hunger Games films because I already have one up for Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is one of the reasons why I tackled this franchise. And now I have them all up. So there you go. I'm gonna give Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 an A minus. I have very little problems with this. Most of them are with Part 1 and how we could have probably used that time a little bit better. But mostly I love the Hunger Games franchise, and I think it works really well. So anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.